Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our seminar on creating certainty through data protection, codes of conduct and certification. I'm Chris Eckersley, and I'm the Group Manager responsible for the delivery of codes and certification services at the ICO. I'm joined today by two of my senior case officers, Michelle Wyatt, who is primarily responsible for codes of conduct, and Lewis Bean, who is currently developing his experience on both codes of conduct and certification. We have what we hope is an interesting and informative session for you. There will be opportunities for Q&A at the end. To support that, please use the chat facility to forward your questions as the session continues, and use the like facility to indicate your favourite incoming questions, and that will help us to prioritise them. I'm going to hand over to Michelle now for a brief refresher on the background to codes and certification. Michelle.
Thank you, Christine. Can I have the next slide, please? I hope everybody's feeling comfortable for the next 30 minutes with this glorious sunshine that we've got today. I do want to just briefly remind you all what codes of conduct and certification are. Codes of conduct are outlined in Articles 40 and 41 of the UK GDPR, and they are voluntary accountability tools written by a trade or representative organisation, and they outline the rules on common data protection issues within a sector, on topics such as fair and transparent processing, security measures, or legitimate interests, for example. They are a good way of developing sector-specific guidelines to help with compliance with the UK GDPR. Codes of conduct are co-regulatory and need to outline suitable methods for the effective monitoring of code member compliance against the code requirements. They need to outline appropriate action in cases of infringement. This level of monitoring provides assurance that code members can be trusted. For codes of conduct that are from a private or non-public authority, a monitoring body is also required. The ICO formally approves codes of conduct and formally accredits code monitoring bodies. Approval is given by the Deputy Commissioner and after a full review and assessment process. The details are then published on the ICO website. Codes of conduct must outline clear and suitable methods to monitor code member compliance. Remember, however, that for private or non-public authorities, it's the ICO approved monitoring body that will conduct the compliance assessment. Once approved and published, organisations within that sector or who have a common processing activity can sign up to become code members, and their customers or stakeholders can view that membership on the code owner's webpage. They can also be assured that this is an ICO approved code of conduct by checking the ICO website for details. Certification. Certification is a way of demonstrating that your processing of personal data complies with UK GDPR requirements. Certification can be issued to individual organisations and therefore cannot be used to certify an individual, like a data protection officer, for example. They are written by certification standard bodies or other organisations, and the scope of a certification scheme can be quite general, so it can be applied to a variety of different products, processes or services, or it could be specific, so for example, age assurance products. The ICO assess and approve certification scheme criteria. Approval is given by the Deputy Commissioner, as with codes of conduct, again after a full review and assessment process. Details are then published on the ICO website. UCAS are the UK Accreditation Service, and they accredit certification bodies to deliver the scheme. Those accredited certification bodies will then issue certification against the ICO approved criteria. I'm now going to hand back to Christine for the next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. So, codes of conduct and certification, what's in it for you? There are a number of advantages for you in either developing or using data protection certification mechanisms or codes of conduct. Firstly, demonstrating innovation. Certification and codes of conduct are still new and innovative compliance mechanisms, and therefore those who create or those who currently use ICO approved DP certification are early adopters and innovators in their field. Raised profile. The ICO approved certification criteria are already available on the ICO website and will soon be publishing ICO approved codes of conduct. Publication on the ICO website is a public endorsement by the ICO as the UK data protection regulator of the quality and innovation of these products. Transparency and enhanced accountability are a key advantage for sectors or organisations using ICO approved, published and endorsed data protection certification or codes of conduct. This in turn provides reassurance to your clients, customers and the public who can access and clearly see the standards to which certified organisations or code of conduct members must apply. Certification and codes of conduct also drive improvement in standards by establishing and demonstrating best practice. They additionally provide mitigation of identified risk around your data processing. Certification codes are developed to identify and address areas of specific processing or data protection risk and provide consistency across the processing areas or sectoral data protection issues to which they're applied. And finally, the use of data protection schemes or codes of conduct, their transparency, their standards improvement and their risk mitigation can provide clear competitive advantage. From business to business contract tendering to customer assurance, for reputational enhancement, or for all of these things. I'm now going to hand over to Michelle for the next slide.
Thank you, Christine. Next slide, please. Thank you. So at the recent launch of the ICO 25 vision, John spoke about the importance of providing greater certainty and flexibility to businesses, and in particular certainty in what the law requires. Codes of conduct and certification are a way for businesses to demonstrate certainty and good practice, thereby reducing the risk of non-compliance. But where are we up to now on the team, and what information do we have available to help you? Well, we have our website guidance. If I could have the next slide, please. You'll see the Codes of Conduct main page, which provides comprehensive information on codes of conduct. This page can be navigated from the main ICO website page. If you go to the For Organisations page, Guide to UK GDPR, Codes of Conduct and Certification can be found if you scroll down the page on the left-hand side. And this guidance provides links to relevant legislation. It provides our accreditation requirements for both certification bodies and for code monitoring bodies, useful application forms. There's also a very useful recorded certification webinar, which can be accessed from the bottom of the certification main page. We also have links in our to our detailed guidance pages from our guidance that you can see here. And those detailed guidance pages for codes of conduct provide information about how you develop a code of conduct, how you can gain monitoring body accreditation, how you can become a code member, and how you can submit a code of conduct to the ICO. On the certification side, those pages provide information about how you can apply for UK GDPR certification, how you can become a certification body, how you can develop certification scheme, and how you submit that scheme criteria to the ICO. If you are interested in developing a code of conduct or a certification scheme criteria, if you're interested in talking to us about this area, if you're interested in becoming a certification body or a monitoring body, or if you're interested in signing up to one of these products or developing these products in your sector, these guidance pages are a must read because they provide comprehensive information that you will need. In terms of our resources, we do have a lot of information on our website, as you can see from the page that we're showing here and those links that I've referred to. But we are looking to improve the resources available, so we're asking for your feedback. We would like to make sure that we are providing guidance and resources that would be helpful and practical for organisations. We want you to be able to easily find the answer you're looking for. So we are considering the development of other products, so checklists, templates, flowcharts, or any visual aid that would show how a code of conduct or certification should be presented, how it should be structured, what language is appropriate, how key requirements should be presented. We want this to provide clarity and certainty to help you plan and prepare your code of conduct or certification. Unfortunately, we don't have time to discuss those today, So please do contact us with your ideas and suggestions, or put some comments or questions in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. If we could just navigate to the next slide, please. You'll see here that this is our certification schemes register. There are 3 certification scheme criteria that you can see there on that page, and this page is navigated from the certification main page that I referred to above. We are the first regulator in Europe to approve and publish data protection certification scheme criteria, and UK organisations were the first in Europe to be data protection certified. Next slide, please. Published codes of conduct. So we are working with a number of stakeholders from a variety of sectors, including IT, general business, the charitable and public sectors. And these organisations are at various stages of code development, but we hope to have our first code of conduct and accredited monitoring body published later this year. So keep an eye out on the website for those updates. As I mentioned earlier, we are hoping to make some improvements to the website. So we are interested in hearing what you have to say and what you think will be helpful. So contact us with your ideas and suggestions. You can see the email addresses on that slide. We've also got the chat function, as I've said. The codes and certification team are available now. We're happy to provide you with advice, guidance, feedback on the development of your products for codes of conduct and certification. So please contact us. Or, as I say, pop any questions into the chat. I'm now going to hand over to Lewis.
Thank you very much, Michelle. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how codes of conduct and certification schemes can help create convenience for those organisations which are part of one. And in particular, I'll be talking to you about what we're calling identifiable accountability. So if you do have any questions about that or anything else, please feel free to pop them into the chat. Next slide, please. So, as we all know, accountability is a core component of the UK GDPR, and being able to identify how and if an organisation is accountable is very important. And over the last few years, the ICO has produced a lot of content about accountability that you're no doubt familiar with. So, from our perspective, it's a very important factor of data protection. Codes of conduct and certification schemes add to this by creating identifiable accountability. So in other words, allowing an organisation's accountability to be easily recognised by its customers, stakeholders and others as well. So before talking about that further, I just want to give an overview of some of the certification schemes that we have up and running at this moment in time. And I think I saw a few questions about that in the chat, so hopefully that should answer these. So first off, we have 3 certification schemes up and running. 2 of those are with the ACCS, which is the Age Check Certification Service. And the first of their schemes is the Age Check Certification Scheme, and that relates to the testing of age assurance products to ensure that they work. So an age assurance product allows an organisation to estimate or verify a person's age, so people can utilise an age-restricted product or service. And obviously that's very much in demand at the minute, and we see a lot of age-restricted items online these days. The second scheme is called the Age Appropriate Design Certification Scheme, or the AADCS for short, and that relates to Information Society Services and is primarily based around the ICO's Children's Code. And thirdly, we have the ADISA Asset Recovery Standard. So this is a standard for processes and sub-processes that are involved in data sanitisation services. So this is where information, particularly personal information, is being permanently removed from IT hardware, laptops, computers, phones, that sort of thing, so they can be securely disposed of, or if appropriate, for them to be reused and sold on. The standard itself sets data protection requirements for the organisations that are actually undertaking these services, and certification is issued against that standard. In terms of codes of conduct, we do have a number of those which are in development at the minute, and we do hope to have formally approved one of these over the coming months, so definitely watch that space as well. So in terms of the advantages of codes of conduct and certification, and in particular with reference to identifiable accountability, both codes and certification provide a means of demonstrating that your organisation is processing personal information in a manner which is compliant with the UK GDPR, and in particular one where you're conforming with the accountability principle. There are also a host of practical benefits as well for an organisation which decides to become a member. So certification, for example, provides a framework for an organisation to specifically follow, helping ensure it's maintaining its compliance whilst also offering assurance that specific standards are being met. So having that defined framework which you can follow mitigates the risk of experiencing a data breach or potentially infringing data protection legislation in some other way. And it can also help mitigate against enforcement action. And to give you an example of that, if an organisation was part of a certification scheme, let's say, and it was involved in a breach or an infringement which was quite serious and it was being investigated by the ICO, if that organisation had followed the terms of the certification criteria and the breach had happened anyway but it had not really been at fault, then it being a member of a certification scheme could actually be a mitigating factor in enforcement actions, so it wouldn't necessarily be aggravating. Similar can be said for codes of conduct as well. It should be remembered though that codes of conduct are slightly different from certification schemes. So codes of conduct are there to address a specific issue that a sector might be experiencing. So if many organisations in a sector, for example, are experiencing a high number of complicated subject access requests, and because of the complexities leading to organisations perhaps not responding to them in the correct time frame or not providing the information they should, a leading organisation within that sector could create a code of conduct which seeks to identify and deal with those deficiencies, and organisations within that sector could sign up to it. In addition, organisations that are part of a code or a certification scheme can be confident that they're going beyond the vast majority of their peers in terms of information rights practices. And in the case of certification, the certification bodies themselves actually issue a certificate which can be displayed as a badge or a mark by an organisation. So again, it's providing further assurance and identifiable accountability. And certified organisations are also listed on the certification body's website, allowing an enhanced form of accountability. There are also registers of certified organisations and code members as well. So if you want to see them, you can visit the relevant certification body or the code owner's website to find those registers. And so for a member of the public, for example, who might be looking to use a particular business or organisation, but who wants to sort of check out whether they have good data protection practices, it gives them assurance that their data will be handled appropriately and confidence in that organisation. So this could improve the perception of an organisation and potentially give organisations a competitive advantage over their peers who aren't involved in a code or a certification scheme. So that's very much how codes of conduct can create identifiable accountability. I'm going to pass you back over to Christine now, and we'll talk further. Well, you're on mute, Christine.
Apologies. So this is all about creating opportunity. So the UK GDPR and of course the ICO actively encourage organisations to develop codes of conduct or certification. They provide an opportunity for your organisation to lead the way in data protection compliance, either through your development of them or even by your use of them. Organisations considering the development of codes of conduct or certification should firstly think about their scheme or code focus, its necessity, and most importantly, the added value and therefore the likely uptake of the certification scheme or code once it's been produced. So before starting the development process, organisations should consider a number of issues. Firstly, strategic need. This can be achieved by horizon scanning. What issues are new or upcoming, which can be addressed by a code or a certification scheme? Alternatively, could a code or a scheme address existing problematic or high-risk processing that you're aware of or that's around in your sector? Or are there other recognised data protection issues a code of conduct or a certification scheme could address within your processing activity or within your sector? Secondly, market demand. Know your market. Intended code or certification users are your market. How well do you know the data protection issues in your market? Have you done any research in your market, whether that's desk-based, whether it's consultation-led or otherwise, about data protection issues and likely or existing market demand for a product such as a code or cert that you may be developing? Consultation and testing of your proposals in your target market or with target users actually raises their awareness of what you're doing, and it also provides you with feedback and an idea of interest and therefore likely uptake of the code or certification scheme you may be developing. Thirdly, available resource. So we know from experience on the team here that certification schemes and codes of conduct can be complex compliance mechanisms to develop, but there are some existing resources out there which can help. So, for example, the ACCS 3 certification scheme, which we mentioned earlier on, and is currently available on the ICO website, is based on the ICO's own age-appropriate design code, also known as the Children's Code. There are other published ICO guidance and ICO statutory codes of practice documents on key topics, such as artificial intelligence and data sharing. You might also be familiar with your own sectoral data protection guidance or established data protection good practice within your sector, which might be able to support your development of a code of conduct or a certification scheme. In fact, we're actually advising on the development of 2 separate codes of conduct at the moment based on existing sectoral guidance. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, so if the right resource is out there, use it. Another valuable resource, of course, is us, the Codes and Certs team, and we're always here to help and advise. And finally, opportunities. So use gap analysis. Are there known or identified needs in your processing area or in your sector that are unmet and that could be met by a certification scheme or a code of conduct? Assess your own organisational capability. Do you have the data protection resource or expertise to do this? Or do you have access to this to develop a certification scheme or a code of conduct? Does your sector or processing activity have the appetite for the uptake of the proposed certification or code of conduct? And if you've done your market research, you'll know this. And also, does your sector or processing activity have the capability of complying with enhanced requirements that would be laid down in a code of conduct or a certification scheme? Finally, devising data protection certification criteria or codes of conduct means that your organisation is an early adopter and it's leading the way in creating certainty through certification and codes of conduct. Next slide, please. So, what's next? Well, as you may be aware, the government ran a public consultation on their proposals for data reform last year. Following that, several changes to the current UK GDPR have been recommended. The Act is actually intended to simplify requirements and reduce burdens. So those organisations who are currently compliant with UK data protection law are likely to remain that way. The most relevant changes and requirements in relation to codes and certs refer to accountability, data subject rights, data transfers, legitimate interests, lawful basis, and AI and automated decision making. More advice and information as to what the changes might mean in practice will be provided by the ICO as soon as we're able to, given that the bill is very, very new and has just been introduced to Parliament. In the meantime, prior to the approval of the new data protection bill, we're dealing with codes and certification on a business as usual basis. So, market demand. We've recently devised further guidance for organisations developing certification schemes in relation to identifying and considering market demand. The guidance is currently undergoing review with the ICO comms team, but should be published shortly under the certification pages of the ICO website, which Michelle demonstrated to you earlier on. So again, watch this space The guidance is written in very simple, plain English, and we hope is fairly easy to understand and is helpful as well to people that are out there. And finally, logos. We're currently considering awarding bespoke ICO logos to organisations who have devised either ICO approved and published DP certification schemes, or ICO approved and published codes of conduct, or ICO accredited code of conduct monitoring bodies. This will enable those organisations to use the bespoke ICO logos on their websites and on their communications for as long as the ICO approval remains in place. The work's currently in development, so again, watch this space and we'll be providing further information on that when we're able to. So that actually brings our presentation to a close now in terms of the slides. We hope you found it helpful, and if you have any queries, we're very happy to answer them now. We are obviously mindful of the time available and the number of queries that we have coming in. So if any of your queries are unanswered by the end of this session, please send them to the relevant code or certification email inbox address shown on the last slide, and we will respond as soon as we can. Thanks very much.
Okay, so the first question, how many codes have been approved so far? How many are a work in progress?
Okay, I'll take that one. So as you heard from the presentation, there aren't any formally approved codes of conduct at the moment. We do have a holding page on the website, and that will be updated as and when our first codes of conduct are approved. So keep an eye out on that, as I said earlier on, for updates. In terms of how many we've got in progress, we're dealing with quite a few organisations at various stages of development, as I've said earlier on. But I think at least half a dozen that have actually put pen to paper and provided us with draft codes of conduct for consideration. There's quite a few more organisations that we've been providing advice and guidance to set them off in the process. But I think at least half a dozen, yeah, that have actually provided draft codes to the team.
Okay, is there one for local authorities?
Local authority, I'm trying to rack my brain. Without being able to answer this in full, in just obviously consideration of the confidentiality, I think we do have indirectly something that concerns local authority on the radar at the moment. That's probably as much as I can say, unless you want to add anything, Christine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the one that you're talking about, Michelle, it does indirectly involve them.
Yeah.
At the moment, we don't have a direct code of conduct in relation to local authorities.
We've yet to have any published codes. Is it worth the effort, or is it just too difficult?
It is very difficult. You've heard from the presentation a lot of the benefits of having codes of conduct and certification. Specifically for codes of conduct, you'll have all heard as well John's vision from the ICO 25. He talks about greater certainty and certainty with legislation, and that's what we've always worked hard to push. The benefits of codes of conduct, they do create that certainty. They are aimed at taking a specific key issue within a sector. So this is something that people are finding difficult. Controllers and processes in a sector are finding this particularly difficult and don't know how they or are unsure how to comply. And so a code of conduct really goes into the detail and gives that practical application. We have a lot of information on the ICO website, but we can't write guidance for every single sector. We haven't at the moment got guidance aimed at every sector, and so a code of conduct will answer those tricky questions and give the rules and requirements for those code members that sign up, to explain to them what it is that they have to do and how they do it. There's also the monitoring element. So the monitoring of code members provides that confidence to their customers and stakeholders. It provides that legal certainty and hopefully reduces the cases of non-compliance and complaints that are made to the ICO. So I do think it is worth the effort. It's an extra legal certain document that, as we said earlier on, it can be quite difficult to put together, but certainly worth the effort.
I think if I could just chip in there on that one as well, in terms of, is it worth the effort or is it just too difficult? It's important to note that we currently have 3 separate published sets of certification criteria on the ICO website. And the process that certification authors go through at the ICO is exactly the same as it is for code authors, really, with the exception of the monitoring body. Not all codes need monitoring bodies. So yeah, it's definitely worth the effort. They can be complex compliance mechanisms. What we would say is be realistic if you're going to start writing a code of conduct. It is meant to be an authoritative statement of data protection compliance within your sector, and for that reason you will need to ensure that either as a code author you have that level of knowledge, or you have access within your organisation, or by the use of, for example, consultant DPOs or whatever you'd like to use to get access to that level of information. But as Michelle said, we've got quite a few in the pipeline now that are coming to fruition, so it certainly isn't impossible. We also have already published certification criteria as well, so it's worth the effort, definitely, if you can do it and if you have the resources to do that, and we would absolutely encourage organisations to do that.
Is there a list of approved codes of conduct we can look to apply to?
There's a holding page, as I said earlier on, at the moment on the ICO website, and so if you do want to check whether there's an approved code of conduct at some point within your sector this year, then if you navigate to that page, then that will tell you what codes have been approved. If you look at the moment today, it is a holding page. There aren't any that are formally approved and published, but we do encourage organisations, if there are tricky issues within your sector that you would benefit from a code of conduct, take it to your trade body, representative organisation, or that organisation that can speak on your behalf and on behalf of your sector, and talk to them about whether a code of conduct would be worthwhile, and we'd be happy to have those conversations. I think that's one of the things to take away, certainly from today, based on some of the other questions about how difficult this is and how it can be quite difficult and how much work is involved. It's important to come and talk to the ICO early on so that we can have that engagement and we can point organisations in the right direction. We certainly don't expect that an organisation can just develop a code of conduct on their own without any feedback or without any advice and guidance from us.
The current certification schemes seem very specific. Is there likely to be a more generic one?
So, Sid, do you want to go for this, Christine?
Sorry, certification schemes, as Michelle and Lou's mentioned earlier on, it's possible that you can have a general certification scheme. If you do have a general certification scheme, it's going to be quite a comprehensive document, because it's needing to cover, by choice, if it's a general one, it's needing to cover the whole of the GDPR requirements. So there could certainly be a more generic one, and there are certain certification schemes at the moment in the pipeline which we've not approved yet. So I would say watch this space. The ones that have gone through at the moment happen to have been more specific, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a more general certification scheme.
Are there any plans to publish in progress codes of conduct? As someone developing one, it would be good to see if there are any common themes in creation to enable organisations and partners to link together.
I think that's a good point that you're making in terms of partners linking together and discussing common themes for a code of conduct within a sector. In terms of whether the ICO plans to publish in progress codes of conduct, no, we don't have any plans to publish those. I think it's important to say at this stage that as part of the process for approval of a code of conduct, there is a consultation requirement. So the code owner does have to consult within their sector, with stakeholders, with customers, with data subjects, and with anybody, other organisations that they work with within that sector, and consult on that code of conduct. And that feeds into what Christine was talking about before, about the added value within a sector and what the take-up will be within that sector. So as part of that process, it's important. We don't anticipate that organisations are going to come to us with completely duplicate codes of conduct. you know, we don't anticipate that happening because, as I say, we do have that consultation phase, and there can be multiple codes within one sector. There are more than one or two. You know, a code of conduct can be quite narrow. It can deal with one key issue or a number of key issues. But if there are multiple issues within a sector, then you could have multiple codes of conduct. But I would encourage any organisation to speak with other trade bodies within your sector, and create an interest group, for want of a better phrase, or an organisation that would then create a code of conduct for everybody. That's something that would be worthwhile. But again, as I said earlier on, just feeding on from that, if you are developing a code of conduct, come and talk to the ICO. We'd be happy to provide that advice and guidance to you.
Will you be looking to formally recognise standards like ISO 27701?
Well, we already recognise those standards. They're existing standards. If it means in relation to basing certifications on them, which I think it might do. I know that there are some proposals, or I think there were some proposals under the proposed reforms that we're going to expect organisations to have management systems in place. At the moment, any certification scheme that we approve has to be in line with ISO 17065, which is relating to the actual processing activities of personal information, and it's not relating to the management side of how you would do the DP management and the governance of that. So it's a possibility going forward. We need to see perhaps what happens with the new legislation going forward, but at present we're having to deal with the legislation we have to use, which is based on ISO 17065.
Is there a risk that the number of certifications becomes too specific and therefore too complicated to manage and for individuals to understand?
I think that's unlikely. So what we're dealing with at the ICO specifically are data protection certifications. If you go onto the UCAS website, you'll see that there are hundreds of different, if not thousands of different types of certification out there. What we're dealing with at the ICO is a very specific niche type of certification, which is a data protection certification. And at the moment, when you look at the ICO website, you can see that we've approved three separate sets of data protection certification, and there is some more in the pipeline at the moment as well. So I think we'd have quite a way to go before we got to the stage where people were so dazzled and overcome with the number of certifications that they found that too confusing to deal with. I mean, they are meant to, in some respects, they can be broader, they can be specific, but where they are specific, then obviously the take up will be by that particular processing activity or sector. So in response to that, I'd say that I doubt we'd get to that situation.
Yeah, I just want to follow on from that, because I don't think we have, unfortunately, any time for any more questions, but certainly on the codes of conduct side, in relation to them becoming too difficult to manage or too difficult for individuals to understand, a code of conduct is written by the trade association or body that represents that sector in a language that members understand. So it's not a document that's written by the ICO, or it's not a document that's written in legalese, for want of a better phrase. It's written for the members and for the people that are intended to understand and apply those rules. I think that's it. Unfortunately, I don't think we have any time for any more questions, but if you have popped a question in the chat and we haven't had time to get to it, please do email the team and we'll pick that up.
It could be helpful if we could put the final slide on, just to show the email address for codes of conduct and certification if possible as well.
Yeah.
So if you have a code of conduct query that's not been addressed yet, please use that address at the bottom, the email address there, codesofconduct@ico.org.uk, and for certification @ico.org.uk. Thank you very much for being here today and joining us on this session.
Thank you.